Hello, everyone. I can see that participants are starting to trickle in. I'm just going to give everyone a few more moments to join us. I know it takes a moment sometimes with the Zoom webinar. It's not immediate. So I see a few hellos starting to come in through the chat. Okay. All right, let's begin. Welcome everybody to the launch of Boys and Girls Screaming. This is co-hosted by Cormorant Books and the Another Story Bookshop, who is our bookstore partner of the evening. I will be sharing a link in the chat. It will be a link to Another Story's page for Boys and Girls Screaming if you would like to place your purchase. So the evening will look a little like this. We are going to have a conversation between Kern and Kayla, who I will introduce in a moment. The conversation will last around 30 minutes and then will be followed by questions. You can submit any questions that you have for Kern in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And that is all the instructions, I believe. I'm going to read the land acknowledgement. So the sacred land on which we operate has been a site of human activity for 15,000 years. This land is the territory of the Huron-Wendat and the Batoon First Nations, the Mississaugas of the Credit River, and the nations of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. This territory was the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the Ojibwe and allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. 2 Row Wampum says, "We are going to live on this land together and respect each other's sovereignty. The Dish with One Spoon is an agreement that recognizes that we live off of the same resources. It is hard to eat a collective meal together off of a dish with one spoon. Hence, protocols are put in place to ensure mutual respect and accountability to each other and to the land. Ontario is covered by 46 treaties and other agreements. Today, the meeting place of Toronto is still the home to Indigenous people from across Turtle Island. Our intersecting communities are comprised of those native to this land, Indigenous people from other territories, as well as settlers who have come here by choice, force, or otherwise a result of colonialism and imperialism. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission 94 calls to action, reaffirms that the treaties with Indigenous peoples must be lawfully honored. We are all treaty peoples and are responsible for honoring and upholding those agreements. We are grateful for the opportunity to work on this territory and to share space with all of you. Now I'm going to introduce Kayla. So Kayla A. Greaves is our host and interviewer for the night. She is a beauty expert, sought after speaker, and award-winning journalist who is currently the executive beauty editor at InStyle. Her work has appeared in BuzzFeed, Teen Vogue, Elle, Fashion Magazine, and more. Kayla has interviewed the likes of Lupita Nyong'o, Mary J. Blige, Toni Braxton, Gigi Hadid, Jennifer Lopez, Naomi Campbell, Halle Berry, Gabrielle Union, Dionne Warwick, Drew Barrymore, Viola Davis, Kate Winslet, Dolly Parton, Chaka Khan, and many more stars. Kayla has been invited as a speaker to share her expertise on topics such as race, journalism, beauty, fashion, and being a woman in media at Harvard Business School, Saya Cruz's Newhouse School of Public Communications, the Jamaica Observer's webinar series, McMaster University, and more. And with that introduction, I am going to hand things off to Kayla. Kayla, please take it away.
Hi, thank you so much for the warm introduction. I just want to start off by saying I'm so excited to be here. So many people are in the comments saying that they are so proud of Kern. I am also extremely proud of Kern. Dear friend of mine, I literally wouldn't be where I am if it wasn't for his help. So I'm just so thrilled to be here. This really feels like a full circle moment. And now I'm going to introduce the man of the hour. So Kern Carter is a full-time freelance writer and author, obviously, who has written and self-published 2 books, Thoughts of a Fractured Soul and Beauty Scars, and also, of course, Boys and Girls Screaming. Kern also has writing credits in Forbes, the New York Times, Global Citizen, Elle Magazine, and Fatherly.com. And along with having ghostwritten several books, when he's not penning novels or ghostwriting, Kern is curating stories through Cry, his online publication that creates a space for artists to navigate through the emotions of their creative journey. Kern, so happy to be with you.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. How are we friends? Like, look how many things you've done. I was when Chantel reading that list, I was like, what? Like, this is crazy. Crazy.
It's all in a day's work, but we're here to talk about you. We're
Oh,
not here to talk about me. All right, so Kern, I don't want to give away anything from the book. I want people to buy the book. So you guys already know where to buy the book. I believe the link is up. Um, Another Story Bookshop is where you're going to purchase the book. But I kind of want to talk about some themes in the book. So this is all about teenagers and coming together and finding community and supporting each other emotionally. And I believe we're both millennials, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yes, we're both millennials. So we there's a lot of misconceptions when it comes to Gen Z, because life has changed significantly since we were teenagers. You know, back in the day, we didn't have social media. We barely even had cell phones, and if we did, it was like a flip phone or a brick phone.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of misconceptions about how Gen Z relates to each other, and emotional support that maybe we weren't used to back in our day. So what are some of the misconceptions you think that people have about Gen Z that your book helps to dispel?
Um, that they don't care about connection. I think that's the biggest misconception, and I think also um, that they don't care about like face to face human connection. Just because they're
Very
online
good
all
point.
the time, and just because they're on TikTok and doing their thing and dancing and stuff like that, just because that's their primary mode of communication, that doesn't mean that they don't care about actually seeing people and being together and community. And I think it's not only is it a misconception, I think it's also dangerous to make that kind of assumption, because when you I feel like when you any kind of categorization is dangerous, but when you really start categorizing a whole entire group of people in that way and telling them that this kind of connection or disconnection is okay, and you start like perpetuating those things through social media and being like, it's okay, your social media world is your world, like like Meta, and you're like you start going off on things like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, it's dangerous. And I think without like caution and without really being careful about educating the generation on how to use these tools and how to use social media and when to be on it and how much to be on it and what to take seriously, then you're going up a really dangerous path. So that's kind of what the like that's my mindset of when I was kind of writing this book. I was thinking through all of those things.
Absolutely. And I think, obviously this is a young adult novel, but I think this is something that every generation can learn from to learn about this younger generation, correct?
Totally. I don't. Okay, young adult novels are interesting. I mean, it's a young adult novel because of the age of the characters, like totally. So it's totally a bunch of teenagers and stuff like that who are the main kind of characters in the book and the main people acting and whatnot. But the themes of the story, the way I wrote the story, like the story is written for really for anyone, So just because the teenagers are the core of the story doesn't mean like you everyone else that I see in the comments who are much older than teenagers. Uh, yeah, you're going to enjoy this book because really it's written about teenagers, but it's not necessarily written for teenagers. So I think there's a little bit of a distinction there.
Yeah, and I love that there's that learning aspect of it that everybody can enjoy. And I just want to remind everybody again, before we move on to the next question, that if you have questions for Kern, please put them in the Q&A section, and we will get to it at the end of our conversation. All right, so obviously you know all about Gen Z because you have a first look at it. You have a Gen Z daughter. So how has it been? What has your experience been as being a parent to Gen Z, and how does it kind of differ from your own childhood and how you think your parents viewed parenting?
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, I think I had to be a lot more open to ideas and open to letting her find her way and open to her having very strong opinions. I think growing up, especially I was born to a Trinidadian mom. I was born in Trinidad to a Trinidadian mother. So,
That's all we need to know.
no, right? So it's. I mean, again, this is cultural, so whatever. Like it's. I mean, when you're born into a West Indian family, for the most part, it's be seen and not heard, right? Like that's really how they interpret that relationship between parent and child.
Mhm.
With my daughter was opposite, and very deliberately opposite. Like I from the very beginning told my daughter, like, listen, you're gonna figure things out on your own. You're gonna be someone who's independent. You're gonna have an opinion. It's like she could talk the way she could talk to me, and always the way she could always talk to me is like she was talking to me like she was an adult since she was like a really young child, right? Like, and I heard Michelle Obama say something that really resonated with me. She said that her mom used to tell her that she's not raising kids, she's raising adults, and that's really how I feel. Like I always treated my daughter like an adult. Now, part of that too is by necessity. I was 18 when I was a parent, right? So I was still a kid. I was still growing up myself. So I was still literally finding myself. I was still trying to figure out like who I am, like what kind of work I was going to do. Like even though I always knew I wanted to be a writer, that's we'll get to that later. Like that was an entire journey. But I was still like figuring myself out. So we grew up together. You know what I mean? Like she saw every phase of my adult life. My daughter was there for it, which is a crazy thing to do. Like she's graduating college in 2 weeks, and I'm not even going to be 40 yet. So it's kind of like a weird situation to have
Got
like
out of the way. I still have to do the whole parenthood thing.
try it. It's hectic and crazy. But so yeah, like I just had to kind of very intentionally have a different approach. Again, some of it by necessity, but some of it just because um like I think we're just in a world and at a time where it's very important for anyone, but especially a young black girl to be confident enough to speak her mind. Like
Yeah.
super important. And I think my daughter is if you've ever met my daughter, she's a Leo. She's confident enough to speak her mind, even if it hurts people. So she's good on that front.
Yeah. So, you kind of spoke to the fact that you were a young parent. That's why you kind of chose to parent differently. But was there anything like super intentional about the fact that you decided to parent a lot more differently than your parents?
Yeah, definitely. I did it. I think just because when I think about I'm careful in the way I'm speaking is because like I don't want to like judge the way my mom raised me. My mom like did exactly what she needed to do. She took me from Trinidad, took me and my brothers from Trinidad, brought us to Canada. Like God, the reason I'm sitting here right now is because of my mom, and she's my probably my biggest supporter. Like definitely my biggest supporter, right? So it's not a judgment of my mom's parenting, but for me, I just think that it's really it was really important for me to take the mistakes that my mom made that I think that she made as a parent and not make those mistakes, right? So again, with the freedom that I gave my daughter to go out on her own and to do things on her own, that was much different. Um, again, the way she's able to talk to me and give me like a little bit of attitude, and I'd be like, okay, like what's up, and have like a full conversation rather than just say shut the hell up. Like that was different, like not getting hit, like that was different. Like I came from a family where you got hit. That was different.
Dude, I'm
So
Jamaican, so I know.
there you go. So all of those things were like very very different for me, and I just wanted to make sure that again, like she saw something, like even something very strange. Like I never bothered my daughter too much about chores. Like I was never that parent to like, because my mom, when I came home, she'd be like dishes, bedroom, boom, vacuum, blah, blah, you know what I'm saying? Like she would be like that, and I never, like, to this day I don't bother my daughter too much about chores, like dishes or something like that maybe, but I give her leeway with stuff like that because I wanted to focus on being her and being herself and finding herself, and those are the conversations that we have. And I feel like if I'm nitpicking about things that are annoying, because chores are annoying to me even to this day. So if I'm nitpicking to her about things that I find annoying, like we won't be able to get to those conversations that we really need to have. And me and my daughter have like the best conversations now, and it's really there's different stages you go through with a child, but I love this stage. I loved other stages when she was young, but I love this stage where we can have conversations and sit down and talk, and she could talk to me, and I can learn from her, and just be almost. I won't say we're friends because she's very very much daddy's little girl, but it's like a very cool connection.
I feel you. I love that. So, are there any kind of themes in the book that are inspired by some of your experiences with your daughter?
Wow. she's gonna be so gassed watching this.
She's the apple of your eye. Why not?
She's gonna be
Gas
so
her up.
gassed. every every book I've written has something in of my daughter in it. Most of the pieces
Book
I
is
write.
dedicated to her. I want to say that first of all. It was a very sweet dedication. And when you guys buy the book from Another Story Bookstore, you'll see the dedication. It's very, very sweet.
Yeah, no, she totally inspired a lot of it. There are moments in our life um that are inspired for sure. Like I'm gonna give some stuff away because I want people to know. I mean, there's the abandonment. So there's like a theme in this book from the very beginning of the book of abandonment, and I think that's been a very big theme in her life and our life, that we kind of cope with and deal with. Um, Friendship, like what does friendship mean? Like my daughter's, that's a huge conversation with us, like watching her and seeing how she navigates friendship. Like it was she has a different idea of what friends are and how friends should be, so that was actually really important to me as well, like, and how important the bond is of friendship, and like not settling, and expecting friends and stuff like that. The main character in the book, her name is Ever, one of the main characters, but the character probably everyone's going to connect with most, her name is Ever, and she has like attitude, like she got like she knows herself, and that's like that was straight from my daughter, right? Like a lot of her characteristics are straight from my daughter. But then also as a writer, you naturally pick things up, right? Like, so you're observant, like if you're a good writer anyway, you're observant and you're able to kind of make those like include or infuse those things into your storytelling. So the way my daughter's room is, like, you know what I'm saying, like the chaos of it, but for her it's perfectly ordered, right? Like if you ask her room's not messy at all, but if you just look at it, it looks like chaos, right? So it's like that, and being able to use that in descriptions has been super helpful. Listening to how she talks to her friends, listening to how her friends and her interact. So like, because dialogue, when you write dialogue, is like super important, especially in YA fiction. Like most of the book is just like dialogue, right? So just listening to the way she talks to her friends and how they talk and interact with each other, that was important. Seeing how boys and girls interact with each other, and girls interact. Like there's my daughter has been my biggest muse, which is so interesting because when I was when I first had it, and I was kind of struggling, not kind of struggling, really struggling. It felt opposite, like I'll be really honest, it felt heavy, let's just say. It just felt like, like how is this going to work out? Like it felt heavy. So, even to see where we are now, and to know that we survived and got through all of that, and now all those stories are coming out in some way, whether it's through this book and through the other stories that I've written. I think it's really been a beautiful thing to kind of experience and to keep experiencing. And the last thing I'll say about that too is that a few months ago, or maybe not even that long ago, I wrote a piece, like just a blog piece, and I said, I'm gonna stop writing so directly about my daughter, because she's of age now where she could start sharing her own stories, right? And she's an artist herself, so she's been expressing herself. So I want to leave space now for her to be able to actually like share the same stories that I've shared, but in her own way, right? Because she would have a totally different interpretation of some of those events, or many of those events. And I mean, like the very next week I wrote about her again, but it's like, it's a slow process. You got to be forgiving with yourself.
I hear you. So, what inspires some of the other characters? Like, was there life events that happened to you, other people that you've met, people in your family, maybe?
Yeah, for sure. So Candace is the first character that you meet in the novel, and she was inspired by a very real event. So my I have a friend who fosters kids. He used to foster kids, and one one day, like he was in the foster home, and a new child had come in, and right before the child was accepted or whatever, um, they gave him a chance. Like he wanted to call his mom, and they gave him the phone. They told him to call his mom, and he's on the phone. And he's like, mom, if you come pick me up right now, they're not going to take me. Like you could come save me, come pick me up. And she's like, no, stay. And she left him in the foster home. And that story, like, it just stuck with me, like really, really, really stuck with me. He told me that years ago. So when I started writing Boys and Girls Screaming, I just knew like I wanted like that energy, like that kind of feeling of abandonment. Like I wanted to kind of play off of that. And so Candace, like at the very beginning of the story, that's what happens. Again, I'm giving away just the beginnings, but still go buy this because you guys need to go read this. But I'll tell you this part because this part is at the very beginning. But I think it's important to know that so Candace at the very beginning, her mom leaves her, right? Like, and she's just 5 years old when her mom leaves her. Like literally, her mom walks out the door. So that I wanted it. That abrupt kind of leave, like I wanted to show that like right away. You know what I'm saying? Like
That
this is
emotion of it, yeah.
abrupt, yeah, it's harsh. Like it's not an easy leave. It's not like she like, like slipped out of their life. It wasn't like a long kind of custody battle or something like that. No, she walked out, boom, gone, right? Like, and what does that do to a child? How do you deal with that kind of trauma? Because really that the book is the underlying theme of the book is trauma, like teenage trauma, childhood trauma. That's the underlying kind of theme of the book, and all the kids that who come together, that's the one thing that they have in common. They've all suffered some kind of trauma. So that really inspired Candace's character. Ever is the other main character. I said she was, a lot of it was inspired by my daughter, and I'd say other girls who I've met. And then Jericho. Jericho's so interesting because I actually found Jericho very early on in the story, and I thought he would just be this throwaway kind of character. Like, oh well, I didn't want to be a an only child. So like literally, I just made a brother just because of that reason, and I thought he would just be like one of those kind of characters. But he actually ended up being a very important character to the story, and the story is actually told. Half of the story is told in his voice, right? Like Jericho's the younger brother of Ever, and half the story is told in his voice. So he's actually the super important character in the story. So it's just interesting that, I mean, inspiration comes from all different places, but one of the things that I'm really most proud of in writing this book is that most of this book came from my imagination. Out of all the books I've ever written, this book came, a lot of it just came from out of my head. Like I wasn't like necessarily like looking, like with Thoughts of a Fractured Soul is like pretty much a autobiography of my life, like, but fictionalized, right? Like my first book. The second book was more so like observations of things that I saw, like when I lived downtown and the craziness of that. This one, I just made it up. Like I was just like, all right, I'm just gonna like make this up, and like play off, obviously like play off some kind of experience, but it really, the majority of the book is just imagination and creativity, and hopefully it's entertaining.
Absolutely. I mean, come on, Kern. Writer. New book.
Trying.
Very entertaining. So, you touched on this a little bit. This book deals with a lot of trauma and a lot of like heavy emotions. And that is not always easy to write about, especially when it's something that you may have personally experienced or your daughter has experienced or something you guys have gone together. So, tell me a little bit about the writing process and how it all came together, how long it took you to write a book, when you needed to take breaks. I think this is actually really good advice for people that want to write and are maybe scared to touch on topics like this.
Yeah, no, there's so much I could talk about this. So I'll talk first directly about the writing process for this book. Books take long to write. I don't know how. I know some authors could push out books in like months. I don't know how they do that. I can't. This book took years. Like literally, like I started writing this book in 2018, and I finished it. Like I mean, it got published. The last edit happened last year, so 2021, right? From my publishers, but it took me years to write this book. And again, it took me that long because, well, first of all, quite honestly, I just had to get better as a writer. To tell a story like this, I had to get better. Really, like I just really had to get better. And I've told a story before, but I think it's important. Like, I when I wrote the first draft of Boys and Girls Screaming, like it took me like a couple months, and I wrote the first draft of it, and I went to New York and I pitched it to agents, and five of them got back to me, and they're like, no, 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 no. But then one of them got back to me, and they're like, I'm gonna tell you what's wrong with your writing and why I'm saying no. And she told me about myself. And you have to understand, when it comes to my writing, I'm super confident, super confident. So when she broke me down like that, I was like, oh, okay. Like I felt a little embarrassed, but then really I just got motivated right away, and I just went like I went and applied for I put myself through college for another year. So I took a novel writing class. for 8 months. I took a novel writing class, and it was like one-on-one with an author. That course on its own, that course changed my writing more sharply than anything I've ever done in my life, ever.
Wow.
Right? Like, it was amazing. It changed my writing. So after that course, and we were actually workshopping Boys and Girls Screaming. So after that course, I was like, oh my God, like, so I was so enlightened. It was like I was on a whole other level of things that I thought I knew, but I didn't know, things that I had no idea about. Like, it was it was just really insightful, and so inspiring, really, to get all that information. So once that happened, I took another novel writing course because I was like, I need to get even better. And once I did that, I felt like I had the tools now to tell the story, because writing, especially like writing novels, is very technical. It's people don't realize that writing, like, if I'm just writing freehand or like writing a blog, even, like, it's very possible to do that and do it well with not much technical knowledge. Writing a novel is not like that at all. You have to know the mechanics of it. You have to understand. So I don't want to bore people with with lingo, but you have to
This
understand.
is good information. People pay
Yeah,
for this.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Free. That's why you guys are gonna buy the book from Another Story Bookstore.
Uh,
Link in the chat.
them game. I'm giving them game. But there's just a lot of technicalities that's involved in novel writing. So that's why, again, to go back, I'm gonna get to the trauma part in a second. I did forget about that. But to go back, even, the reason why my first book, Thoughts of a Fractured Soul, it's a novella. The reason it's a novella and it's only 72 pages is because I didn't know how to write a novel. So it wasn't because I was like, oh, I'm only going to write this short book. I literally did not know how to write a novel. I didn't know how to put it together. So I wrote it in this way that I felt comfortable with, which is short form, more shorter form writing, right? And even though it did well and I loved that book, it was the creativity of it was by necessity. It was because I didn't know how to write a novel. So to fast go from there in 2014 to 2018, like, actually understanding what it meant to put together a full novel, and I really felt like I had the tools. So that's step one. Like, I feel like, in order to write in the way that I wrote, and wrote this, and to write this book in a way that was, that could speak to an audience, that was deliberately targeted at young people, that dealt with trauma, that told a story that was entertaining, that was like, to do all those things took like a lot of tools. And then the trauma part, um, that part's kind of interesting because last year, 2021, I wrote this. I wrote this short. I guess you'll call it a short story, but I put it out in 5 parts, and I called it "My Failures as a Father," and I put it out in as my newsletter. And it was almost like, it felt like having like an underground hit. Like, if you're a musician, and you have like this underground hit, that's what it felt like. People responded to it more than they ever responded to anything that I've ever written. And, excuse me, it was all real stories of my father being a father. Like, I really went deep into all those stories, and but again, focused on myself. But when you're telling a story about trauma that's focused on yourself, it's very rarely that you're the only one who's involved in that trauma. Usually other people inflict trauma on you, or you inflict trauma on other people. And that was the situation. So my daughter's mother, I spoke about, my mom, my dad, stuff like that. And then, like, those people got upset and started talking to me, and like, why would you say this? Why would you do that? Blah blah. Like, they really, so the what I realized from that is that everyone is kind of at a different stage of their healing. I was only able to write that story, write My Failures as a Father, because I was at a stage where I felt comfortable writing it. I was healed. I was over it. Let's go. I could actually write this. Everybody else might not have been there yet. You know what I'm saying? So, with Boys and Girls Screaming, what I think is beautiful about this story, but also a little bit dangerous, there's like a lesson in it, is that when these kids come together to discuss their trauma, they're all at different places of healing in their trauma. They don't know, like, they don't realize this because they're kids, but they're all at different stages. So while one character is like handling this well, and they feel like, oh my gosh, I'm like getting better, this is helping me, other characters are like dissolving and devolving and like struggling and getting worse, because these are like, it's 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 beautiful that they actually had the idea to do it. Um, but the fallout from it, and obviously it's fiction, but the fallout from it is also almost like a lesson to and I don't want to give away too much, but there's almost like a lesson in there, you know. So I think, although I think it's important that people are kind of able to speak to other people about their trauma and not feel like you're so alone, I think there's also something to um, being very careful about how and when you expose yourself to that sharing, because you don't, you have to do it in a way that's very kind of confined and careful and curated in a little bit.
And you can't take it back. Like once you share certain things with people, you can't take that back.
Hmm. It's out there forever, forever, and you have to. But that's why you have to trust the space. Like literally, the best part about the stories that they meet in real life. Like they come up with a thing that says you're not allowed to like leave this room and share any of these stories, and the kids keep it like that. They keep that rule. So what that does is it just makes you. It makes the kids feel like the people in this room are enough for me. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't matter about how many followers I have on social media. It doesn't matter about, you know, if this kid tried to say something to me on social and put something out. No, like everyone in here, I think there are six of them. We're enough. We're enough for each other. We're going to be enough for each other. So even as people are like going through, or the teenagers are going through different stages of their healing, there's still this super tight connection and bond that they all have, and this togetherness and this community that they've created, that makes them feel safe, you know. So that room and that connection, and that they call themselves bags, like the acronym for Boys and Girls Screaming. So they're bags. They all they really feel safe with each other, and I think that's that. If you know, I wrote this book, again, I was very deliberate in the way I wrote this. I wrote this book really hoping that young people who read it take that. If they don't take anything from it, they take that from it. Like find that person, or find that group of friends where you would feel enough for each other, and you don't need the approval of anybody else, right? Because I think I think there have been some incredible things with social media and technology in general. We're gathered here today because of technology, but the need for approval is one of the negatives of social media. Like you really feel like a like is important. Like really, you really feel like it's important. And
Mhm.
if you don't get that, it does things to you, and it makes you feel inadequate in ways that it shouldn't. So I again, I think if kids can take anything, or young people can take anything from this book, is just that, like really feel like you're enough and know that you're enough.
Yeah. How do you write books in a market that is so oversaturated? Because it seems like everybody and their mom has a book these days.
Yeah, I know. Good question.
That is still so intriguing in a market that's so oversaturated.
Um, Good question. Um, I, you know, I had this whole conversation with somebody over Twitter about what's good, and they were really opposed to the concept of there being good and bad writing and good and bad books. I'm actually opposite. I think there is good and bad writing, and I think there are good and bad books. Now that's it's art, so there's a lot of subjectivity to it. But I think there are, and I think one of those things is, first of all, I want to acknowledge like there's a lot of luck involved. Like I got lucky. Like I got lucky with my agent. I have an incredible agent. So you know, like to
Also, Ern, you're very talented. There's also
yeah,
that. And you're also a good person. So when you're good, good things come back to you. But
I
you know,
would agree. I would agree.
there's
But
also that.
there's that. I'm gonna get to, I'll praise myself. I'll get there. I'm gonna say that. But I just want to acknowledge that there's luck. So like I had a really incredible agent who support me. Like my agent tells me I'm a star. Not that I'm going to be a star. He says like, no, Kern, you're a star now. Like that, you know what that does to someone's confidence, to be like, yo, yours, you know, it really helps. So that there's that. Um, to have publishers, to be real, like to have someone pay for your manuscript, to have someone say, in this capitalistic world that we're living in, have someone be like, here's some money for something that you wrote, like an idea that you wrote, that does something to you. There's validation in that. So, and most artists are looking for validation. That's what art is. But I think again, there's, and this is where I'll probably, you know, talk about myself a little bit. There's a lot of skill involved in like writing, and a lot of learning involved in writing. And I think the one advantage that I have, or the one thing, I feel like I have like a couple of superpowers. Like one of my superpowers is that I feel I'm very, um, I I can interpret culture really well. Like I could see what's happening on Twitter and in music and in pop culture and all that, and I could just um, uh, like relay all of those things or mush all those things up into like a story that feels really, really real and of the moment, you know. But not only of the moment, but like simultaneously feel like it could last forever. Like when I think about when I was writing Boys and Girls Screaming, I was thinking about like like so many like the Breakfast Club, and like I was thinking about stuff like that. Like I was really thinking about books that or and stories that last forever. So I was consciously thinking about that. So that's one thing. And then the other thing too is I think a lot of writers struggle with being um, deliberate about how they write. So like a lot of writers just want to be like, I'm just gonna write like whatever my heart wants me to write, and I'm gonna love it. And honestly, that's amazing. I think that's there are writers who can do that and do that well. And there are parts of my writing where I feel like I can do that and do that well. Like I have like my blog for that, right? Where I could just like write from my heart. With novel writing, for me, and with this book specifically, I I wanted this book to be published. I wanted this book, wrote this book specifically targeted. I want to tell a story about teenagers, so I wanted it to be a YA book. I knew that going into writing it, which is I've never done that before. Um, and then I wanted an audience to be able to get it right away, like right away. I didn't I So the surface story of Boys and Girls Screaming, that's why I feel like people navigated to it, it's like so quickly. That's why I think like my agent liked it and then the publisher liked it so quickly, is because the surface story of it is just easy to catch. It's about a group of teenagers who are getting together to talk about their trauma, like Boys and Girls Screaming, right? It's so quick to get. And then where my creativity gets to come in is that I get to use my skill as a writer to be like, oh, you like this surface ass story, but here's now how now I'm gonna hit you with all these themes and undertones and like crazy cultural references that's going to make this book deep and last forever, because really that's what I want. Like I want this book to last forever. Like that's how I'm thinking about it, you know. So I was very deliberate about how I created this book, knowing that I wanted it to get published, knowing that I wanted it to be commercial, which is also another uncomfortable thing for a lot of writers. Like I knew I was writing in that mode, like thinking about that the entire time. And for me, like this connects to my career too. Like the way I think, I mean, Kayla, you see me and you know me, like I want to be the best ever. Like that's my mindset. Like I don't care how stupid it sounds. Like I actually want to be the best ever. Now, whatever happens is whatever happens, right? But I'm gonna function and make decisions and operate and learn and study and write like that is a reality. You know what I'm saying? Like that's how I'm gonna move. Like so
And it is reality. So
there you go. We get to create our own world. I really feel that. Like I'm not even here for there's I really feel like God put us on this earth without a purpose. We create our own purpose. Like we create it. And so why not create whatever purpose that you want? And this is my life. This is what I really want to do. You know what I'm saying? So
and you're doing it and
and
it's
I'm doing
happening
it.
and it's here.
That
It is
is
here,
fair.
Kern, and I can't believe that we're having this conversation. I love that we're having this conversation. It was a beautiful conversation, and thank you so much for your time and your openness and sharing everything that you've shared, and for writing this book
Thank you. Thank
that
you.
is, going to be a success, because it's already in the air. We already know that it's going to happen. So
I
I
hope
see some of you guys have submitted some questions. Thank you so much. If you guys want to ask her anything, make sure to submit your questions. But before we get to it, we're actually going to play a brief video. So I will let Chantel take it away.
Sorry, one moment. All right. I
listen, I'm a writer. Ask me what I do, and I'm going to tell you that I'm a writer. Ask me who I am, and I'm going to tell you that I'm a writer. I've been a writer since I was 3 years old, pretending to read novels. I've been a writer since I was 8 years old and wrote my first book. It's just part of me, it's part of who I am. And listen, I titled the book Boys and Girls Screaming for a reason. Even though it's a fictional story, the themes and the emotions, they're real. Because the way I see it, today, the boys and girls are screaming. They're dancing on TikTok and they're streaming video games and they're like, look at me, look at me. And we're not even looking at them. So then when they go harder and they're like, look at me, we're still not looking at them and we're not seeing them. So what my novel Boys and Girls Screaming does is it says, what would it look like if teenagers took matters into their own hands? The three main characters in my novel, Ever, Candace, and Jericho, they decide to form their own healing group. And they form this group made up only of students from their school. No teachers, no parents, no adults at all. Just teens gathering in a basement in real life. They're not online, they're not on anyone's live, they're in real life. And what this intimacy does, or what they hope to get out of this, is that they'll feel seen and they'll feel heard. And hopefully the people in that room become enough for them. And that's really what the plot of Boys and Girls Screaming is about. Because we wonder and we ask, is it enough? Is it enough? I swear I heard someone clap.
I'm clapping. I'm clapping. I'm so proud of you, Kern. Oh my gosh. Okay, so we are going to move into questions. Are you ready, Kern?
Yes, yeah, let's go.
All right. So Maria, thank you for your question. Maria says, I know launching your novel is taking lots of energy, but do you have any other works in progress? What's next?
Yeah, of course. I I'm a writer. I have like two books already. Like I have one book I just sent to my agent this morning. I have another
Wow.
book that I probably should. I have another book that I signed. I just signed another book deal, but I'm not going to say with who yet because it hasn't been announced. So I'll just wait for
I just signed another book deal, casual.
so I'll wait for that one to come out. But yeah, like I'm always writing, and I have another book idea that I'm working on. So this is life, man. This is something I'm going to be doing forever. So yeah, I am writing. I'm always writing. I write every morning. You guys know me.
Onwards and upwards, always.
Always.
All right, Maya, what type of story structure do you use while writing? So I think maybe you could speak to kind of like blogging versus like editorial versus novels.
Oh, okay. That's an interesting question. I wish I could actually speak to that first. What kind of story structure? I mean, um, I don't, I don't, um, I don't do outlines. So if that's kind of part of the things that you're talking about, I don't do outlines. I'm someone who I literally think of the story in my mind first before I even like um jot anything down, like start writing the novel in full. I think about the story in my mind first, and I also catalog a lot. So like I'll be walking or thinking or in the bathroom, and I'll just be like, oh, this will be a good idea for this and this. Like so, I catalog a lot. Um, but I'm someone that needs to know. I need to in my head know what's going to happen before I start writing. Like that's how I am. So I don't outline. I just write, and then after I write the first draft, and at least it's been like this in like most of my books or the all three of my books. I literally delete like half of the story after. So like in my first Thoughts of a Fragile Soul, the first draft was like 300 pages, and the book ended up being 72 pages. The second book, Beauty Scars, like I deleted 10,000 words, and then a Boys and Girls Screaming, I gave you a little bit of a example of what that process was like. I deleted over half of the book. So for me, it's just, which I think should be normal. Writing is editing, so you should be able to do that. But again, the thing about me is like I do a lot of writing. So like you're mentioning, Kayla, when I blog, it's totally different. When I blog, it's just like it's from my heart. When I'm like that specific blogs, like if you're reading my blog on Medium, it's from my heart. I'm just writing things that are going through my mind and I'm putting it out there. I do essays too, like that's a little bit different of a structure. Like I'm actually doing research. I like to talk about the publishing industry a lot, and stuff like that. So that's a little bit different. That those pieces will take me a couple of days. But the stream of consciousness pieces take me like like whatever, half an hour, 10 minutes, 5 minutes sometimes. Yeah, it just depends on the type of thing that I'm writing.
Absolutely. Markella, hi, Kern. I have a question. How do you keep yourself ready, especially during such tough times,
Good.
pandemic, etc.? I think just being alive right now is pretty tough. So, how do you stay motivated? How do you stay inspired? I find like creativity is hard to find during these times for a lot of people.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. What's up, Markela? Markela's another amazing writer. I'm sure you're gonna all be reading some of her stories soon. I've read some of them. Um, See, I feel almost privileged saying this, but I don't. I always feel inspired. Like I don't have those even in these times. Like I've never. I There was maybe a week when the pandemic first started where I felt heavy, but I I love this, man. Like seriously, I really, really, really. I've When I say I'm privileged, I feel like I'm one of those people. I always knew what I wanted to do. I always knew I wanted to be a writer since I was damn near born. So it just it's who I am. So there's no like motivated, not motivated, like that like I don't function that way. I'm always inspired. I'm always motivated. I'm always writing, always. So that's a terrible answer, but that's just the reality of my personal situation. Now I do things to like get myself excited, maybe. So maybe again, like I'm really connected to culture, like in pop culture. Like I like seeing what's happening in the world. So I would say if you're looking for advice, I would say always be observant and live your life. You know, like there's you can't really write unless you're living and experiencing things. Like I've experienced so many things. That's why I could write. You know what I'm saying? I was born in Trinidad, grew up in most of my life in community housing, then moved to a well-to-do neighborhood, then went back to the hood when I had my daughter, then went to university, dropped out of high school before that. Moved, like I've had so many different experiences that I could really tell stories with them and use them to as catalysts for my story. So I would say live life and write about it.
That's true. As an artist, you need to have experiences. You can't just kind of like vomit things out. It doesn't work. It needs to come from a genuine place. There needs to be genuine feeling behind it.
Agreed.
Right. So Emily asks, who is your favorite character to write about? I'm assuming in this book, and why?
Um, so I'll have two answers. I think everyone's going to connect most with Ever because Ever is just that person you want to be. So I think it was fun writing her because she was just a really confident character. So that was probably the most fun. But my favorite character is actually Candace. I think Candace is my favorite because Candace is probably the most deep character. She just and the so you know the story is told in the voice of Candace and Jericho. And Candace is just the one that um I think her strength, her her flexibility is the wrong word. Just she's really um she's kind of a protector. I don't know. I just something about Candace, I think, in her strength and in who she is and how she is that I felt really connected to. So I think writing her was the easiest. Like again, she was the first character I found and I started writing and I literally started the book with her. So I think she was definitely my favorite. Yeah, yeah, I'll stay there.
Okay, so on the topic of characters, how do you go about developing the characters in your story? Like, do you have a specific process for doing that, or you just kind of, YOLO it?
Yeah, good question again. Yeah, no specific process other than I would say there's a point when you're writing a story, when you're writing a novel, especially when you're writing your first draft, where like characters are they sound similar and they kind of like act similarly. But once you start editing and getting into to drafts, I think it's really important um, that you let those characters take over. You know, like there's a point where you understand the characters so deeply that you would know that, oh, my character would never say that, they would never behave like that. So there are times when I'm writing and I'll write something that Candace says and I'll be like, what the hell, Candace would never say that. Once you get to that point, you're like, okay, the character is taken over. And let's let them take over. Like start feeling that and start giving into that, you know, and don't be afraid to let go a little bit. Like writing, you could feel sometimes a little bit cramped up, like you just want to be perfect with your language and all that. Like nah, like I learned from Marlon James about really being um being very, very creative with language and being like, who gives a fuck? Like I could make characters talk. Marlon James wrote A Brief History of Seven Killings, and half the book is in patois. Like what? Like you would never ever.
Could be.
Yeah, as it should be. But you would never, like, people would never think a book like that would be good. The book won the Man Booker Prize. Like he's dope, and he's a really, really, really dope writer. So I think I took inspiration from that and being like, okay, like if he could trust himself and trust the characters, right? Like because that's how the characters would speak, right? So for him to trust the characters that much, I was like, okay, trust your character, and I trust the characters. I think in character development, I think it's important to trust the characters.
Mm-hmm. Question from Anthony. So you mentioned that you felt like you acquired the tools necessary to write a novel via the course that you took. So are there any other particular skills that you would like to develop in order to expand your skill set?
Yeah, I want to keep becoming more patient as a writer. I think the one thing um, that was like my biggest flaw early on was become I was impatient. Like I was moving the story along too fast, and I was like, yeah, I was just very impatient. And I think I've again when I took that course, that was one of the things that I noticed. I was like, I learned how to slow down. I learned how to keep characters and scenes in the moment. Those things were important. But I think I also want to just like get better. And I think I'm really good at it now, but I want to get great at it. I also like I feel like okay, so like back in the day, like back in the day, like the 1600s and stuff like that, writers would build up to writing like their epic poem. You know what I'm saying? Like that they would like build themselves up and then they write like I don't know, like whatever kind of crazy poem that or story that we think is incredible right now. Um, so I feel like there's like an epic in me, you know, like I want to be able to have I want to be a master at knowing every single part of the written English language. So like I want to go back and get my master's and PhD so I could be like I know all the rules so I could just break all of them, you know, like but I want to know them first. I want to like master the rules first. So like the technical rules of writing, like I again, I'm good and I'm better, but I want to master the technical rules of writing so I could just like break them. Cause like my one of my favorite pieces is Paradise Lost. I actually have like verses tattooed on my arm from Paradise Lost, right? So that's one of my favorite books. And if you know the discipline it took to write a book in the structure that he wrote it and still have it be that good, you would lose your mind. You would lose your mind. So I want to be like that. I want to be a master. So yeah, I'm thinking about figuring out how to go back so I can actually learn all the doctor rules and then break them all.
I love that. I love that. Okay, so we are closing up soon, so we're gonna take two more questions. We can answer them super quickly. The first one is from our dear friend Pollyanna Reed, who I did she introduce us? I can't even remember. We met so long ago.
I don't know if she introduced us. I don't remember.
This vortex of like Toronto people. I don't remember, but shout out to Pollyanna who's here right now. Do you have plans to work with up and coming writers in some capacity, mentoring, workshops? Any plans to expand the brand?
Love it. What up, Pollyanna? I saw you in the comments too. Yeah, for sure. I already kind of do that to be real. Like I mean, I've helped. I don't know, I've given space to a lot of writers. You know, like first with the magazine, the online magazine, I've given them space. But even, I mean, there are writers on this call who I've spoken to and offered my like just my assistance, you know, or offered a good word, or offered like actual like I will read this and tell you what I feel about it. Um, but that's just a natural part of everything I do. So I mean, with Crime Magazine, we do that. We give writers a space to share their stories. There's another platform we have called Love and Literature that gives them like an editorial space to share their stories, where they have like chapters that they can write. We have another platform called Teens Love Lit that gives teenagers space to share their stories. Like these things are active right now. Like Teens Love Lit is something you could go to right now and check it out. So these are platforms that myself and my business partner have created that's what we do. We give writers space and we try to help them through the writing process. And for me, I'm someone too, I'm easy. Like if you hit me up, I'm a little soft. So if you hit me up and you're like, oh, I'm a writer and I'm just getting started, I'll probably be like, all right, what's your shit? Send me your stuff. Send me your stuff. So like if you get me, like I'll say that. Don't take advantage, but I'm soft. Like Markayla knows. Markayla's in here. Markayla could send me anything she wants. I'll read that shit. So it doesn't even matter. Like I'm easy. I'm easy.
I love that. All right, final question. What do you hope readers will ultimately take away from the book?
Whew. Um, I have this thing where I say when I anything I write, I want people to feel inspired and then impressed. So I want the same thing for this book. I want readers to really read it, especially young people. I want them to read it, connect with the characters, and feel inspired. Like I want them to feel like, oh, like I there's a way for me to feel seen. There's a way for me to feel like I'm enough. Like like I really really want them to take that part out of it. But then the author side of me wants other authors and writers to read it and feel impressed to be like, damn, like how did Kern write that? Like I want that because that when I read like Toni Morrison or like I said Marlon James or Kim Twee who's Canadian or Madeline Chen is also Canadian. Like when I read those authors, I'm like, how do they write that? Like how? Like I get so sometimes I throw the book on the floor, like I can't even get to this. Like, what am I doing out here? So I want people to read it and feel inspired and then also feel like impressed to be like, like this is actually really well written and really well delivered.
I love that for you. And it's going to happen, obviously.
Thank you,
But
Kayla.
the only way to feel those feelings and to be inspired and to be impressed is to purchase a copy of the book through Another Story Bookstore. The link is in the chat. You guys save it, like, subscribe, buy 10 copies, whatever you need to do. Support the book. It is a fantastic book. You are going to enjoy. You're going to relate to the characters in ways that you never imagined. So, Kern, the
Thank
floor is yours. Any final words?
No, just thank you. Thank you, Kayla, for doing this. Like I really, really appreciate it. And really, honestly, like I this is so weird, but I really do want to thank my publishers and my agent. I know, I feel like I'm giving it a
Won an Oscar.
I know I just want an Oscar out here, but I do because I feel like it takes a lot to give a book the the space it needs to do its thing. And they're just giving me the space I feel like I deserve and I've earned. And I feel like this is it's amazing. I'm really thankful to them, really grateful to them. They've been amazing. And I'm hoping that we could do like a lot of things together, a lot more things together. But thank everybody for sure. I feel the most love and support ever. The last thing I'll say is I wrote on Twitter today, I said, I don't really function off hate. My writing journey has been like love and support. And that's because the community of writers and supporters and readers that like people who are on this call has been incredible. So thank everybody. I really do feel love. So
Of course you do.
yeah.
Of course you do. All right, now I'm going to hand it off to Chantel.
Thank you so much. Just to close the night off, I just want to say a huge thank you to Kayla for interviewing Kern today. Kern, you both had a wonderful conversation. It is being recorded currently, and it will be up on YouTube for anyone who missed today for whatever reason, and for anyone who wants to rewatch the event. It will be up on YouTube shortly within the next few days. Thank you again to Another Story Bookshop, who is our partner bookstore for tonight's launch. I have shared the link to purchase Boys and Girls Screaming in the chat, and you can also find it on wherever books are sold, independent bookstores, Indigo, but we really do encourage that you support your local independent bookstore in whatever way that you can. So thank you again for a wonderful night. And everyone, I hope you have a great night.
Thanks all. Buy the book.
Yes, buy the book. Good night, everyone.
Good night.